everyone, welcome to the webinar. So excited to have you here. My name is Laura Murphy. I'm here on behalf of Tech Connect, and we're joined today by Charlie Nobles and Mike Grigsby. I'll share a little bit about them in a second, and we're going to talk about smart lighting and smart cities, lessons learned in building future-ready urban infrastructure. So as you know, many cities begin their smart city journey with lighting, but the decisions made at that stage can either unlock future innovation or they can create long-term constraints. So today, we're going to talk with TerraGo Technologies. These two individuals have spent their careers helping cities and utilities make those decisions wisely, sort of those early or really decisions at any stage that would impact, future city growth. So I'm really excited to hear from them. If you have questions as we go along, this is a great opportunity to get those in the control panel. Anytime you can ask them, and at the end we'll get to as many as we can. But this is a casual conversation. I know the two of them are open to anything that you pitch their way, so feel free to drop your questions there. So just to tell you a little bit about our team, Mike Grigsby is Executive Advisor for MW Griggs. He's a digital transformation advisor specializing in smart cities, public infrastructure, and government technology adoption. He's also a former municipal CIO, so he has firsthand experience navigating those real constraints within the city government, and now works at the intersection of public sector priorities and technology providers, so helping cities adopt innovation without that unnecessary risk that we're talking about. And so he focuses on de-risking complex tech decisions and aligning those solutions with operational needs. He has more than a decade of experience in the smart cities ecosystem, advising agencies and companies on how to scale. So Mike brings a rare perspective, right? He has both sides of the table. He served as a municipal CIO, and now he advises cities and technology providers on how to adopt smart infrastructure without creating long-term constraints. So welcome, Mike. Glad to have you here.
Thanks,
and then we have Charlie Nobles. He's the Smart Cities and Utilities Market Lead for TerraGo Technologies. He leads their smart city and utility strategy at TerraGo, focuses on platforms that enable scalable infrastructure, and he has deep experience in smart lighting, grid infrastructure, and outdoor asset monitoring. He was a former utility executive. You may have heard of what is now Duke Energy, and he led AMI evaluation and deployment at what was then Progress Energy. So he previously led smart grid and outdoor lighting initiatives at both Ubiquia and Census and worked with utilities globally there. So he brings the technical and operational perspective on how connected infrastructure can evolve from lighting to the broader city operation. And so Charlie has spent his career working on infrastructure, that layer that exists behind cities, from advanced metering to connected lighting. And he has a deep perspective on how those platforms that we choose today affect what you can build tomorrow. So together, they're sort of the dream team. We're really excited to have them both in the room talking with us, helping cities set priorities, talking about that strategy. And we're going to start just with a short kickoff from them to frame this discussion, and then this will really flow more like just a panel conversation. So like I said, enter your questions in the chat. We'll get to as many as we can. And with that, I'm going to let you guys go ahead and get started.
All right. Well, thank you, Laura. Quick shout out to your birthday boy, John Fox. I think he's registered. Happy birthday, John. And I'll say no more about that. He knows why I'm letting him know that. So Laura kind of summed up a bit of the challenge. This first slide is a kind of a busy slide. And if you can read the fine print, there's different disparate solutions mentioned in this picture. And cities, have disparate siloed departments and assets and groups that have to resource and manage these things. What we're going to talk about today is a bit of the non-sexy, like how do you get the work done? How does a city really become a smart city? For years, that's been the question. And what is the killer app? And I don't think, one of the things I'll say today, and I really appreciate your comments, your questions, your challenge. If you disagree with what I say or Mike says, first of all, it's Mike's fault. Second is, put it in the comments. We'll talk about it. We'll try to defend the position. Tell us if we're wrong or if we're missing something. Yeah. But cities are uniquely challenged for the reasons that Laura mentioned and Mike knows all too well as a former and recovered CIO of a city. And they oftentimes kind of the back The backstory is they look across at what would make our city smarter, they could see all kinds of improvements. They tend to fall back on smart lighting. And I'm going to tell you, I think that's a great place to start. I think smart lighting is sometimes like the anchor tenant of that mall property. Now you go out and you get the anchor tenant, the Nordstroms or large big box retailer. And when you get those folks in place, the developer has an easier time adding the rest of the shops, even down to the mom and pops. You can't start with the um, small shops. You start with the anchor tenant. And street lighting for most cities is the anchor tenant of that mall property called smart cities. Very visible, very scalable, and it has scale. The small shops, the small solutions just don't have enough device scale to really interest the vendors. They could do something, but they really don't see the value, or they can't make money doing so. So what we're going to try to talk on, and Mike and I are just going to riff on this back and forth and share our thoughts, and is, okay, so you start with smart lighting. And we saw this back at the Smart Cities Connect event in Raleigh a couple weeks ago. Okay, there's a way of doing that well that does scale to the rest of the moms and pops and shops. And there's a way that doesn't scale so well to the rest. So if you start with smart lighting, how do you get there? How do you actually scale? What's extensible? How can you actually get value out of that starting point, which I would agree is a great starting point, but how can you get more value out of that point and truly scale to all the rest of the solutions that the city needs in a cost-effective way that actually brings value and at the same time drives down O&M costs? That's like the holy grail. And we're going to try to provide some anecdotes, some thoughts, what we've seen, some trends, maybe some original thoughts as well. So let's pop to the next slide. Mike, do you want to comment on anything I've thrown out there before we get too far into this thing?
Yeah, Charlie, I really love the fact that you kind of referenced it as the anchor tenant, and I think it's important too, not just that smart street lights is the anchor tenant, but I think also understanding kind of the why behind it. One of the things that when you look across virtually any city, you have tens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of streetlights across your city environment. And the reason it becomes the anchor tenant is because it's already at scale. You already have this deployed. You already have your team, your internal maintenance team, or your management team is already oriented around this. You have work schedules, et cetera, things along those lines to maintain that. So it's already a familiar asset of infrastructure that you can now leverage to do other things and broaden this. We'll talk more about this, but Charlie, I love that you kind of referenced that as the anchor tenant, and I think that's an important point for people to camp on.
Thank you. Okay, so this slide, this is a very short piece here. I want to talk about who we are and how we got involved in the smart city space, and also we're very involved in lighting for smart utilities. Streetlights are either owned by one or the other, the cities or the utilities. And you can drive through a town and not know which owns the streetlights in that town unless you stopped and asked. So Terrago has developed, for years ago, had developed an operational platform to manage any workflow, any operational effort, activity, workflow done by city or utility for field deployed assets. Now, it was not developed for street lighting. It's just that the first scaled solution that came knocking at the door was street lights. The first real need was help us manage our street lights. And we'll show you, once you start there, I think there's a way to get there to the rest of the solutions that a city wants to deploy. To date, our Terrago platform, which is vendor and hardware agnostic, actually manages over 10 million streetlights. And actually not all of those are controllable smart streetlights. We manage the streetlight operations for cities that still today have passive lights, maybe just converting to LED fixtures, not yet putting in controls. You still have to manage those assets, whether they're smart or dumb, they still have to be managed by some resource. And we've done this not just in North America, we've actually done it in other parts of the world. We're doing it today in Belgium and other places. So we've got a lot of experience, scar tissue, learnings, things we didn't think about until you scale. And then when you scale, you figure out, okay, that doesn't scale, and you actually reconfigure. So we're trying to share what we learned in some cases the hard way. And that's kind of a bit about who we are. You might not have heard us, but we're involved with almost every large and small deployed streetlight deployment you've heard of. If I had to start listing cities that you might be familiar with is Philadelphia, Memphis, Nashville, Chicago, San Antonio. On the utility side, I could list Southern Company, Duke Energy, Exelon. So we've been pulled into this, and we're also managing many other assets with the same platform. So that's who we are, and that's why I think we have a comment to make. The last thing I'll say about our platform, which you'll hear this, especially the next slide that I think Mike's going to take lead on, is when we put this operational platform in place, if you do have smart devices, it connects to those devices. It connects to the bespoke device software that each vendor has for their own device, but it also integrates through RESTful APIs into the back office. And that's really where the magic happens. If you can connect your dumb and your smart devices in the field, and any workflow related to the maintenance of those devices, the management of those devices to your back office systems, and integrate any workflows in real time, you're kind of sitting between the two camps that are not talking today. And that's kind of really where the magic happens and the scalability happens. That's where you drive down the cost of managing resources in the field. So I think Mike, take it from there, and I think we can roll on, I think, to the next slide.
Yeah. So I'll talk about this through my lens, having sat on the table, or the customer side of the table, meaning the public sector side, because there's always the challenge of how do you start this, right? Where do you begin? You know that you want to move into a smart city kind of direction and kind of get the benefits from it. I always find it comical that absolutely nobody wants a smart city. Everybody wants the benefits of what a smart city delivers. So there's a way that you have to bring all this infrastructure together and make it. One of the things that we saw early on was individual domains kind of getting smart or bringing intelligence to the table. We saw public safety have a lot of different kind of evolutions in what the technology was delivering, or we saw it on the public health systems or public work systems, and all of this data that was being generated by these things. I think it's important to know now that as we're talking about streetlights in particular in this case, in 2026 and beyond, every physical asset within a city, virtually, I should say, every physical asset has a digital heartbeat now. And there's a corresponding component between the digital side of things and the physical side of things. You've probably heard the term out there, phygital, kind of a combination of those two terms. But that's what we're talking about here, is how do you take those physical assets and how do you get them at scale? And then how do you begin to grab the data from them with meaning, with intent and purpose to do this? Cities have for a long time operated, again, within those silos: public safety, public works, parks and rec, and so many of those. What cities are needing now, 2026 and beyond, especially as we head towards the 2030, the year 2030, which is a pivotal year, cities are needing not just the operations within those siloed domains, but they're needing the synchronicity, the cooperation between all of those domains. Charlie and I had a conversation not that long ago, and we were talking, as we start to see the smart street light environment get more and more intelligence for the lighting division, it doesn't necessarily translate over to public safety. So for example, if you have a single street light node, you may know all of the dynamics and data that's going on around it, right? Power in, power out, tilt, vibration, all kinds of different things that you have intelligence about that pole. But public safety may not know that street light was on or off during the traffic accident that occurred last night. And being able to have that kind of synchronicity and that kind of cooperation between domains is really the next level of what we're seeing in smart cities. So the challenge is really scalability. And Charlie, I'm going to toss a question back over to you. As you and I have both from different ends, as we've worked on with different cities on this scaling, why is streetlights? I mentioned it earlier just a moment ago, but why do we look at streetlights, and why does that become kind of the I like to call it kind of the zero entry point to the swimming pool?
Well, I think you've touched on it. It has scale. In fact, you mentioned early on that it already has some operational effort coordinated around it. Someone's got to deploy them, maintain them. Typically, you find out streetlights are out because someone finally gets frustrated enough to call. You have to receive in customer service that phone call from the irate person, dispatch a crew. So they already have to manage them. And what I'm finding is when they start going to smart lights, they think that that's going to drive down their cost. It drives up the data. It drives up the alerts, the alarms. Sometimes it creates data fatigue. And now you've opened Pandora's box. Can you really service all of the noise that these smart devices are throwing your way? So I think, and yet when you install these devices, you don't necessarily go increase the size of your resource pool, the folks that are managing these in the field, people in the bucket trucks and such. You actually think you're going to reduce those number of people, and you find that they're overworked. So I think it has scale. That's a wonderful place to start. But this title here, why platform first? I hesitate to say it because it sounds like I'm being accusatory. I'm not. This is not a normative statement. But we don't think through how we're going to manage the operations of it. We look at the shiny object. Oh my gosh, that's a control node. Let's go get that. We compare one versus the other versus the other. Which one do I want? It's kind of like picking the tires you like most before you buy the vehicle. And then you spend all this time on the choice of node or vendor. And then now what? It's spitting out so much data, you just want to turn it off. You want to turn off the thresholds and alarms because you don't know what to do with it. Somewhere you need to know, is there a work order in this thing for me or not? Or is that just noise? Because I'm just tuning it out. So I think it's the wonderful place to start. But if you don't look at your platform first, if you don't walk through how you're going to manage this and have a platform that can help you do that, that's where we come in. That's where we've been pulled into the projects. I think that's where you begin to kind of find yourself in the ditch a little bit until you realize I've got to actually look at some better way to manage these resources and these new attributes, these new functionalities before I just go buy shiny objects and put them on the Christmas tree. That's kind of what we've seen, what I've seen. And I think we say that and it's operating beyond the physical assets, and you touched on that as well. The second thing that happens, Mike, is that if you have an operational platform, then you can make other choices. You have options. You can say, I have a platform that's agnostic to the choice of vendor A, B, or C. I'd really like to have a little bit of vendor A, B, and C in the mix. These for my decoratives, these for my roadways, these for these Cobra heads. Why can't I do that? Well, if you don't have a platform, you can't do that because you want to learn 3 different software applications to log into. And when you dispatch a crew, they have to know which vendor's solution is out there. That's tedious. They don't want to see that. So you have to abstract that out of the picture. So when you get a platform first, let the platform deal with a one pane of glass vendor A, B, and C's options. And we're seeing more and more cities and utilities say, I'm going to actually choose a multi-vendor, multi-node environment to get more value out of this new functionality without bringing along the complexity of it, because I've got a platform that can abstract that noise out, can take all that noise, add my business rules, and drill down to just give me work orders to work that are qualified work orders. That's kind of what the platform first means. If you have that platform first, then you have options. Now, I think the question, somebody on the call is thinking, okay, I started off with a shiny object. What do I do now? Can I get there from here? And I can tell you, over half of our customers, we were pulled in after the fact to help kind of fix a hot mess, to be honest with you, to kind of help them put some parameters around and drive the increase in O&M cost down below where it was even before. And you can absolutely put a platform in after the fact, and then you can get those options back. It's not a zero-sum game. You can still win-win, but you just need to start thinking about the platform.
Charlie, as you're talking, you're kind of making me think about this. One of the things that I do, and in the work that I do with cities, is I really help people find their orientation around things. And one of the challenges of the whole smart city genre is nomenclature. We get hung up in buzzwords and things like that. And this idea of platform, it probably means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And as you were talking, I had this picture, and we've probably all heard this story before. There's the story of an elephant, and then these blind men each trying to describe a different part of the elephant. One says that it's this trunk and it's like this. The other says that the leg is like this, and so forth. But the story, and I heard this one time, the story is described from the perspective of an agnostic observer. The person telling this story is the only one that can see all the blind men and the elephant and understand that the elephant is all one unit. I think that, and I'm kind of bouncing this back with you, I think that's kind of the notion of the platform. It's an agnostic observer, and in this case, communicator, because you talked about workflow, but it's an agnostic layer that's above all these different domain systems. Talk about that a little bit and help people kind of find their footing around this term called platform.
I actually love the way you viewed that, because I've never looked at the story that way. The person telling the story actually has sight, and they're watching these blind men, right? And they're seeing what the elephant really looks like. Each one of these blind men, that's kind of vendor A, B, C, and D. They only see their part and where you place them, and they don't have any knowledge. They're not integrated with any other system or any other device. So they can only describe the condition of the asset they're physically touching and nothing else. The platform looks across all. It gets all the data. It normalizes the data, right? Because a threshold alarm from vendor A might be treated differently and presented differently than a threshold alarm from vendor B. They've got to be normalized so that you can know how to weigh them. Then there's the metadata. A platform could take the data from the lights, but the Terrago platform actually treats the fixture and the pole as part of that endpoint asset grouping. What if the pole is leaning? Back to your point about other departments, a leaning pole is a dangerous pole. Lights are fine. There'll be no alarm necessarily from the lighting control node, but somewhere somebody may notice and call in, hey, you've got a pole leaning on the street. That requires actually a different resource type. This is where the platform comes in. It's the right resource for the right job. If you knew the pole was leaning and had to be reinforced, you wouldn't send the person who really only knows how to install a fixture, right? You would send a different resource. Then we're going to talk about that, because the resources are not fungible in a city. One resource may be the only person that can manage the EV fleet or things in the park. Another person may be the only person who has the skills and the tools and knowledge to manage like replacement of a driver in a fixture. So if the resources aren't fungible, the resources are trained and equipped for specific types of projects, products, shiny objects. And this is the other part about managing the assets. When we talk about assets, we'll see in the next slide, we're talking about more than just the fixed physical assets. There are mobile assets as well. In fact, I'll give you this quick anecdote. I can't take claim for this. I wish I could, but Philip Mezzi, the former Itron CEO, told me this. He said, customers complain, they're using the software, and they can't seem to distill down, well, do I react to this alert? Do I run on a truck on this or not? And the vendors typically will give them, to this patient who's got a pain point, give them more vitamins, more functionality in the software. Well, if you use the software, we'll train you again on the use of the software. No, I don't want more training in the software. I don't need vitamins. I need aspirin. Give me pain relief. Just distill for me. Can you just tell me which of these alerts I should care about and which I shouldn't? If you could distill that down, then I just need to focus on operational workflows. And that's kind of what Tergo does, is they take all those functionalities with context and metadata and distill down the vital few that are things you need to go work on. In the day, cities, the operations manager needs to know, is there a work order in this for me, or do I just ignore this data? Really, give me work orders. And that's kind of one of the things we've seen. Now, I think we can probably go to the next slide, because I want to use an example. And Mike, feel free to jump in as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is Chicago. Years ago, several years ago, I think 7 years ago, maybe longer, they embarked on this very large conversion to LED with smart controls. And we were not in the picture at all. They picked out the shiny objects, they picked out the vendors, they did all their due diligence to qualify them, a good product. What they did not think through at the time was operationally how they could manage this. And when they start taking the data in, how do they connect that data in real time to the back office systems? In fact, typically GIS systems are notoriously outdated. They have an approximate view of all the assets in the field, but then when you start installing devices in the field and getting real devices show up on a map, if it's not in your GIS system, which happens, is, oh my gosh, I guess we better create this record. Or if your view of that asset was a block away or had a different wattage fixture on it, then you've got to update that. So how did you take what's really a physical scrub of the as-built environment and incorporate that and update your back office systems in real time? We were brought in after the fact, and it was only streetlights. It was just help us manage the operational workflows. And the interesting thing, I want to explain the slide so you can follow me a bit better. The two views on the left are actual screenshots from a mobile device, not a laptop you carry in the field, but what people use in the field are hardened mobile applications, native to their operating systems, native to mobile. The one on the left, see if I can better describe this. I've got some notes here in case I lose my thought, because I'm partially colorblind, folks. You don't know that, but now you do, I guess. So on the one on the left, there are some blue lines. The blue lines are active circuit segments that feed streetlights. Because if you start with the lights, the fixtures, and you realize, well, the poles are part of the endpoint. Now, in some cases, you circuit switch lights in and out. You power them from different circuit segments. What happens if the issue is not the fixture, but the issue is the circuit segment? So in the picture on the left, you've got some blue lines, which are active circuit segments. Red lines, if you can see them, I can't, but I trust you they're there, are removed or relocated circuit segments, where the city, for whatever reason, had to relocate that segment. Maybe there was a widening of a street, for instance. The blue squares are manholes and handholds, which, by the way, those are physical assets that cities have to manage. If you have to get to the circuit segments, you have to know if there's a manhole or a handhold that you would use to access the circuit segments. They have to be geospatially captured on a map and in your records. So you can dispatch not just to the work, but where will the work take place. And finally, the green circles are actual fixtures. If you see the number 2, that means there's 2 fixtures on that pole. Nothing's more frustrating than be told, go out and change that broken fixture, and you go out in the field and actually there's 2. Which one are we talking about? Did we know there were 2? Now the middle slot, the picture you see, that's a little different. This shows a highlight there with additional manholes, handholds, and fixtures. So the far right shows you the asset count. Now imagine, I'm weaving this long story, but please follow me. You start off with streetlights. You buy LED fixtures and you buy control nodes, and then you realize you have to manage those. Then you realize you need to manage these circuits that are feeding them, because those are somewhat fungible in how you circuit switch them. So you see from the top to bottom, remember we talked about scale. This is back to the mall property. The fixtures and the poles are huge amounts. of scale. Circuit segments, huge amounts. Now we're creating work orders. A work order is actually can be treated like an asset. Circuits, individual circuits, controllers, and now you see you're actually mapping out all the power infrastructure that supports the fixtures. Now look below, look at crew members. Remember this idea of dispatching the right crew resource to the right location? Or am I working on a circuit? Or am I going to get in the bucket truck and go up to the fixture? Or do I even need a bucket truck? So guess what? Vehicles are an asset. Dispatching the right crew, the right skills, the right training, the right tools, the right vehicle to the right location to do the right piece of work. That takes coordination. That takes a platform. And then there are your crews. And you see, why are there crew members more than crews? Well, there are such things as two-person crews, right? Bucket truck work sometimes requires a two-person crew, one to manage the bucket, one to be in the bucket. Or is this just a service truck with one person? And then what if you use third-party contractors, managing them out of the resource location, they're headquartered, and then you're doing dispatch route optimization. You have a city like Chicago. From which operation center do you send the crew that has the shortest drive, the route optimized time to get it done? This is not super sexy. This is blocking and tackling. I would say if this was an NFL football team, we're talking about the role of the left guard, okay? But if he doesn't block his man, the quarterback's will be on his back. So, but it has to be done. And this is the operational part that's oftentimes overlooked. But you need a platform to help you manage this. And then you can start layering in asset after asset after asset, and you can manage it holistically. Now, you're the person looking at the elephant. See, Mike, I gave that back to you. I completed your thought.
That was good. He's batted that right back over. I think it's important too, because we are way in the weeds on this, right? When we're starting talking about, the count of contractors and vehicles and every one of those, you begin to understand all of the kind of the burden of management of a single domain. And we're just talking about streetlights. We haven't even talked about parking meters, or we haven't talked about other assets that might be out there, street signs or anything
about
else.
Street signs,
right?
Traffic signaling.
And these are, again, so many of them are across the city. And so one of the things that I do want to do is, obviously we've gone down to the weeds on this. I know that the work that I do with cities is I work a lot with the people that are probably the audience that make up the audience of this particular webinar right now. They're smart city folks, meaning they're either chief innovation officers, or maybe they're chief information officers, or maybe you actually have a title of smart city coordinator. As you're listening to this, I just want to kind of connect some dots on this. As you're listening to this, yes, we're talking and taking a deep dive into streetlights, but this is applicable across domains and across assets that are out there. I just mentioned smart parking. Think about all the different components that go into your parking system. Think about all the different systems that go into tracking public safety assets that are out there. All of this is for the purpose of understanding what the platform gives to you. And the platform is, as Charlie had mentioned, and we've already said it a couple different times, it normalizes all of those domains to give you functionality and workflow across disparate systems and seemingly unconnected or disconnected domains. So, Charlie, as we were talking about this, I think it's important to help people understand that, this looks really daunting. How do I go out and count all my streetlight poles? How do I go count all my contractors? How do I go talk about how somebody would begin to how would they begin to get started, to begin to get ready to start to do this? Because that could begin.
Yeah. Oh, it can be daunting. Well, I can tell you this evolution here was not anticipated at the start. Again, it started with a LED upgrade with smart controls, and we weren't even brought in at the start. We were brought in after they got unwieldy. But the point I'm making here, I think we're beating this horse to death a bit, is streetlights is a wonderful place to start. It has scale. You'll have vendors. You'll have support. Think through the operations platform. If you put an operations platform that is vendor agnostic, it's asset agnostic. In our case, TerraGuide's platform was not built for streetlight control. It was built for assets in the field and managing any part of a workflow related to work that had to be done on those assets. And cities are not going to solve their silos across departments overnight. What we're trying to put in there is a cloud-based operational view across the silos. You're not going to break them down. We're not trying to break them down. We're just trying to provide the head of public safety can see the condition of assets controlled by and managed by public works that might impact and affect public safety. You gave the example, I loved it. Your experience as a police officer is like, wouldn't you like to know if you were doing a stakeout of a location, wouldn't you like to know if there was some other issue that public works was involved in that might affect this project or affect what you were doing and vice versa? Would they like to know why? I remember years ago, a public safety person told me that the public works folks were not happy with them because if they had a domestic dispute and they needed to get it dark, this was before the days where you could just hit a button and turn off a light. They shot out a light. So they shoot out lights, they resolve the safety issue, and then they might let us know, oh, by the way, those 2 street lights, you might want to go check those out because we just shot them out. Right. So again, we can't solve the problems of siloed departments and their various needs. But what we can do is provide an operational layer that provides visibility across them. And then you could, again, use the right resource allocated to the right workflows and update all your systems real time. So yes, don't get overwhelmed by this. Get the right platform in place. And actually the other pieces kind of fall in place like Tetris. They begin to fit. And then you can see your way clear. As that's kind of, I guess we've talked enough to probably generate enough provocative response. Hopefully there's some questions brewing out there. Maybe we can take a stab at them, Laura.
Yeah, for sure. Let me stop sharing. One question just off the bat, you're talking about creating operational efficiencies for the cities, changing how they do business. So for the cities, the many cities you've worked with who've implemented the platform, what kinds of outcomes do they tend to be most interested in other than just efficiency? Is it sustainability? Are they seeing, cost savings? What does it do down the road once they've done this? Sort of what are the outcomes that you're seeing?
Well, I'm going to give this to Mike because I'm thinking of a certain example where, without stealing his thunder, where a certain city told us, "Oh man, I love the solution, I love the platform," and I realized there's a lot of technical debt that we have to service. We have so many resources; they're all allocated. If I could free them up to move them to higher value projects, I would do so. But the problem is, I can't free them up today. It's like I'm in a catch-22. So Mike, why don't you talk about that, because that seems to be one of the issues that cities have, fixed budget.
Yeah, and budgets work very differently in the public sector than they do in the private sector. And while looking for cost savings is a motivation in the public sector, it is not always the driving factor. And I think that's one of the things where industry kind of gets that a little backwards, or maybe they kind of over prioritize on that. What's more important at the city level is being able to reallocate your current resources. Meaning, if you have, and I'll just stay with the street lighting, component. If you have, 200 crews, but you also have 4,000 work orders that are pending, cost savings is not your driving priority in that regard. Getting more crews freed up faster to the right place at the right time to resolve those work orders, that's the kind of intelligence that you need. And that is actually a higher priority in many cases than just getting cost savings. So if you are able to get the intelligence to understand that you need to send this type of crew versus that type of crew, send this vehicle versus that vehicle, you don't even need a vehicle, you need this circuit versus this. being able to get that kind of intelligence not only puts your crews in the right place at the right time, solving the right problem with the right equipment, but you can resolve that faster so that you can retire more of those work orders. And that goes directly back to citizen satisfaction surveys, right? As the citizens or residents are able to respond and say, yes, things were resolved more quickly, or better yet, in some cases, they may get a notification to say that we've already replaced 3 street lights in your neighborhood and you didn't even know that they were out. That's the kind of thing that really helps on the kind of the satisfaction side. Again, going back to those, being able to allocate your resources. How many cities out there are having more and more budget restraints, having to do more and more with less and less? That ability to have that kind of intelligence goes directly to what that platform is able to deliver. Another thing too that's happening, I guess kind of a benefit, we'll say that the platform is, I'll take it up to an executive level within cities. So you're talking mayors, you're talking city managers, council maybe, or certainly department heads. What's really interesting is the kind of the acceleration and the acceleration of the introduction of new technologies is pushing us at an unprecedented pace. And a lot of your city executives are now coming, I like to kind of say, they're being reluctant co-CTOs, right? A lot of your executive levels, they came in with to help fix the roads or make better schools or budget the balance the budget, things like that. But now they are making era-defining decisions around perpetual SaaS contracts or data sovereignty and things along those lines. This type of platform allows either the executive leader or certainly that inner circle of leadership, gives you the intelligence and the visibility into what's happening so that you can make those types of decisions with much better equipped. You'll be much better equipped to make those types of decisions moving forward.
Good point.
Yeah, you're not reallocating, you're not taking back, taking away, you're reallocating to higher purpose, creating efficiencies that essentially are cost savings. You're not cutting back at what you're doing. You're just able to do so much more now with those resources. Right. Yeah, great. I have a question here that I think is really great and kind of speaks to this technical debt piece. So I'm going to jump into one from the audience. Allison Brooks from IDC. Hi. She said, are y'all, that was for you, Charlie, able to add in a kind of ROI tracking into your solution? And she just said that she and Ruth B from IDC, whom I think most of us in the Smart Cities community have some familiarity with, they're writing a lot about process debt. So we've talked about technical debt. Are you also seeing anything about misaligned processes and policies that's starting to compromise and slow implementations even more? So what's that looking like for cities, and how are you responding to that?
Yes, first of all, hey, Allison. Thanks for meeting with me in Raleigh. Allison's using y'all because she knows I'm a Southerner, and which means I don't have, I speak English as a second language. I speak Southern English as a first language. So, well, let's talk about this. Okay, the other benefits of an operational platform is you can track in real time. So back to this idea of multiple crews. Sometimes there's a project and you bring on third-party crews. Well, how do you know, one, they're completing the work? There's a QC requirement. Two, crew A gets X done per day. Crew B only gets Y done, and why is that? And at some point, you're actually trying to figure out whether your spend in third-party crews or your own productivity measures are sufficient, because you've got a project that has a timeline is based upon crew productivity. So what we're seeing on the process side is, however you want to put a dollar figure associated with it, when our platform is used, like an example in Chicago, we actually dispatch the crews. That's why we keep up with crews and which crews as assets, because we are dispatching them. We dispatch them. When they get there, that mobile platform that we showed some images from has a very specific list of things they have to complete to finish the work order. The minute it's completed, it then goes back up into the back office system, and we track that is a issued work order, a completed work order, and how much time it took to do it and which crew did it. So then we can run constant reports on productivity of crews and work type that was done, resources, truck types that were used, tools that were used. And you can look at this from a process standpoint and say, wow, does this match up with how I sold this project? Or, wow, there's a glaring issue. Am I best allocating the crews out of that resource? I'll give you the example. We talked to a city that is trying to now install some EV charging stations and manage them. And they've got one person who is trained to do so. Mike, you know where I'm going with this. I'm not going to tell who the city is. And the trick is that that person works out of the office on one side of town, and it takes 2 hours to get to an issue where one of the EV charging stations is on the other side of town. And sometimes they have gone out there and realized that the charging station is operational. The power to the charging station was interrupted. This should have been a call to the electric utility department in the municipal utility, not his department. And now I've wasted 4 hours, 2 to get there and 2 to get back. No trouble found, complete waste of half a day. That's not very productive. From a process standpoint, having more data and realizing cause, and then at some point, maybe you look at where your non-fungible resources are physically situated, and you move around your fungible resources, your mobile resources, to better align them with where they'll do the work, thus get more process productivity out of them. Now, again, all that rolls right into an ROI calculation. You put the dollar value to a truck roll, a weighted truck roll. It varies by city, by state, whether it's third-party crews or not, and that generates your ROI. But from a process productivity standpoint, how can you measure the productivity or lack thereof if you can't keep up with it, if you don't dispatch it and record it when it's done? Hope that answers the question. Allison, if not, give me a call back.
But Charlie, I'll add to that, because I love that you're framing this up through process debt. That sounds like a really terrible way to think about it, but it really puts you in the right frame of mind, because so many cities, and there's probably not a city out there that's listening to this right now that isn't thinking of or isn't aware of a spreadsheet that is critical to some essential function with regard to process. The idea that you're able to go and move workflow up into this platform means that you're going to have to actually look at all of the workflow as it's being put into it, which gives you a chance to look at the processes that you're doing. And you may find that you can literally take 4 steps out, 7 steps out, 9 steps out of your current process because of the way that it's going to be put into the platform. I think the other thing too, again, it sounds very, very negative to talk about process debt. I think there should not be any blame put on cities for where they are right now. They had to do it this way because either the technology wasn't there or they didn't have the personnel or whatever the case was. So understand where you are and know that there is a path forward that allows you to streamline some of that process and recoup back. And as Charlie mentioned, that goes right back to your ROI.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I have another question from the audience, and in fact, this one reflects back a little bit more, just digging out a little bit more technically into the platform itself. So I think we can all agree that this relies heavily on data, and the use of it helps us to be empowered more with data. How are we getting it? And so I think the question is from someone who at the implementation level is curious. How do you, at crew level, supers, admin, how hard is that capture? Are we having challenges with that user interface? How are we making that seamless for, sort of the day-to-day user that's putting in data? What's that like?
I'll take a stab at that, because I think this is where TerraGo has just accumulated years of experience in what works for the customer. And at the end of the day, I think a couple, 3 things have bubbled out. One is there's a tremendous amount of data in all the back office systems, and that data doesn't necessarily normalize or communicate with each other. If you have, data's in Maximo, data's in SAP, data's in Salesforce, data's in a billing system, data's in GIS, and there's 3 to 4 different major flavors of GIS systems which may not be compatible. The data is there, and part of the technical debt is if you expect your IT group to go in there and create some platform where you're going to start combining data out of different back office systems and normalize it and contextualize it and add metadata to it, that is a multi-year project. That's not the technical debt you want to embark on if you're a city. And where Terrago has been very successful is we do that for you. We've already done that. In fact, once we've made a commercial connector, an API set of API instructions into, say, one vendor of a standard GIS system. If we roll into a city that they say, oh, we have that same GIS system, with small tweaks, we just reconfigure and reuse that commercial connector. Otherwise, IT would have to start from scratch to build it. We've already built most of these connectors. So we just rinse and repeat. We tweak them unique for the customer, but we leverage what we've already built. We configure, we don't code. That's critical. And then we put this in the cloud. So what we're doing is we're trying to take burden off of cities' IT teams. Again, they have tons of technical debt. If we can come in, put a platform that scales in the cloud, we already have API interfaces into these standard back office systems, into the vendor solutions. And then we can manage that for and on behalf of the city. And then give them the reporting, the analytics that they need. Again, do you want to see all the data, or do you write the business rules? And we will distill down for you the work orders. And that I'm gonna make that a bit clearer. That's not really complicated. In some cases, let's say a certain vendor device, it creates an alarm based on some threshold. And sometimes the alarm latches, means it doesn't self-clear. So even though the thing went away, it was an intermittent, it was a temporary event. No need to run a truck on that. But the alarm's still sitting there flashing like it has an issue. Do you run a truck on that or not? Sometimes the business rule is wait 24 hours and see if it's still there. It can be simple business rules, but you have to wrap these business rules around from the city and from our experience to say, okay, in these cases, we would recommend you not run a truck yet, or you would go consult this other set of data to confirm, or like in the EV station example. Consult the data from the electric department to see if there's an outage in the area before you send the person 2 hours across town to service a fully functional EV charging station. Simple things, but how in the world is the city going to do that themselves? It's going to be very difficult. So we've been successful because we've layered in this using the existing data they already have. We're not asking them to create more data, and then we wrap the business rules around it, and then we help them drive out the workflows.
I've got a couple questions about sort of the current state of things, and really three that have hit on AI. So I want to ask you about that. Can your work, can the platform rapidly rough code and build ETL? Sort of a more technical question, but at a higher level, sort of how is agentic AI influencing all of this? How is it going to change the game, sort of for you as a platform provider, but also how are cities thinking about this when they consider, the use of a platform? Are they integrating AI and other data analysis? What's it's all happening so quickly, and what should cities be thinking about? Yeah.
Can I first make the caveat and the disclaimer that neither me nor Mike are AI experts? Can I say that? Mike, are you okay with me labeling you with me?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, good. So I will give you a take. Again, this is what we're seeing. This is trends that we see in our own experience talking to folks. So I think AI is layering in several ways. One is, I want to hit on one point about code generation. Mm-hmm. Our platform, we started 20 years ago developing this platform for the military. They were tracking other types of assets, like imagine troops, ordnances, vehicles in a battlefield environment. And so we made the natural extension over to smart cities, where the assets are differently defined, and some are mobile and some are not. So one of the things we did early on, we, not me, I was not there and I'm not smart enough to do this, but they created a platform that they call a no-code platform. It was set up to be a configurable. Since it wasn't built for a certain type of asset, you have to define the attributes of each asset. Is this a mobile asset? Is this a fixed asset? What are the attributes around the asset? And they created a set of a deep software coding that was configurable, so that there's really very little new code to be developed when we go to the next customer. That's really critical. So yes, we use AI, I'm sure, in our code development, but the core platform is already coded. Okay. The second thing is this, and it affects things like analytics, reporting. You tell what type of reports you want out of it, what kind of analytics, back to process improvements or QC QA of crews and productivity measures, or a heat map. Show me last month a heat map of where most of these types of alarms occurred. Is there a root cause I'm not seeing? Well, you can craft out these bespoke reports and analytics, and then the next month they'll say, hey, can you change this, or can you change that about it? But what's happening is we want that to work like we do with ChatGPT. I want to use a simple phrase like, show me the heat map of where these certain alarms happened last month. Is there and then follow up with, is there a root cause? And let that define dynamically the attribute, the analytic that you want to see, and boom, it pops up. Now, why is that possible? Because we are certainly, and maybe others are as well, we're moving away from hard-coded analytics dashboards to dashboards or analytics driven by using AI against the data. Now, back to this data you mentioned, Laura, if you look at all the data in all these back office systems and you start to create relationships and metadata which links them in a platform like we're doing for operations, what you've created is your own LLM, large language model. And now, in the more work orders you create, and the more alarms and alerts you get, and the more business rules you apply, you're making further linkages between these, what looks like disparate data between disparate assets across disparate departments. You've created an LLM, and now you can actually bounce your AI questions against your own data, which is confined into the four corners of your environment. It's not for public consumption. It's your data. And so the agentic AI models that we see going forward in our own platform will be using those common English questions to create AI questions against your own database and on your own models. Does that help?
Amazing. I think that's a great response. And I love how you're able to bring in sort of technical insights, but then you're really keeping it high level, systems level. So even for someone who's even less of an experienced AI practitioner or city practitioner, I'm following right with you. So that's great.
No more AI questions. That's the last one I'm going to take.
That's it. AI. Yeah. And we have only a couple minutes left. So I want to ask you both sort of just a final question. We've talked about technical debt, process debt, sort of reasons to start with a platform, what this looks like at the deployment level, some case studies. But let's just say you were advising a city that started its journey maybe 5 years ago. They feel like they want to take the next step. They've done a few things and they're not really sure what to do. Sort of in 30 seconds, what would you tell them to think about first, in addition to calling you? What would you say? What's the first thing to focus on?
Yeah.
Mike, why don't you take that? Because you're more of a city person. I'm more of a utility whisperer, and you're a city whisperer. So
okay, we'll do that. I think what's important, especially for the people who are likely listening as part of this audience today, is IT and OT, operational technology and information technology, have been two different areas of the organization that have not historically come together well. And all the changes that are happening in technology now are really forcing emerging, I would even say, a hyperconvergence of those two areas. If you're listening to this today, I think what's important is to understand the details. Charlie dove deep into the weeds on this. The details that were shared is enough to go back to your operational technology, your water and your lighting departments, et cetera, and say, these guys can speak at that level. They can bring it together, and there's a platform up there that speaks at that executive level that I talked about earlier. So I think the question that you should be asking yourself is, where do you want to go? Like, what are the benefits you're looking at? And understand, I think it was on Charlie's first slide, just think platform first.
Yeah, the only thing I add to that, that's a great response, is you don't have to get 100% right before you start. It's kind of like parenting. You don't know anything when you start. Just do something, right? Respond to cries and yells and figure out how to feed babies, right? And to be honest with you, one of the things we can bring in is we bring in our accumulated experience, our knowledge of what works, what doesn't seem to work, what scales, what doesn't seem to scale. Sometimes customers say, well, what business rules are we talking about? And I gave you one. You get this certain alarm, wait 24 hours, see if it's still there, or get other data. And it's not overly complicated. We essentially just sit down and we map out what your outcomes, what outcomes would you like? Back to the cities, how would you like to, if you could free up 20% of your existing crews off of what they do every day today, where would you put them? What other thing would you, why do you want to have two people running the EV charging stations, one that lives on the other side of town, perhaps? Tell us where you redeploy them and what you want to get them off of. I feel like I got 8 people that only do this thing and it's just taking up all the time. Okay, let's take the process around that and see if we can't skinny out of it. Manual processes, too many steps, too much bureaucracy in it, spreadsheets, whatever. We kind of start with back to the aspirin versus the vitamins. We're trying to solve the patient's pain, not just give them, a vitamin regimen. So we just would start unpacking it as anybody would, and say, oh, let's just start there. Again, let's just start with lighting, or let's just start with this asset, and we just work it from there. That's kind of where we naturally would start.
Seems like Terrago is offering this platform. It's technology agnostic. It's moving with you. It's looking ahead to AI. But really what you keep reinforcing here is just the level of importance around the partner you have. That the platform's your partner. It's going to do the work. Sure. But also having experienced practitioners like you both involved is so important. And, we know, because you've been so involved in the Smart Cities Connect community for ever in your various roles, that you both have super deep experience, and that really makes a huge difference when you're working with a city that really wants guidance. So it's been a pleasure talking with you both. I hope those who were able to call in gained some important insight. And happy birthday, Charlie, to you as well. Hope it's a great day.
And,
that was a secret.
Glad you put it in.
It's John's birthday. It's John Fox's birthday
and
too.
Also John Fox to you too. So thanks to everyone. And if you have any questions that weren't answered, I'm sure that the folks at Terrago will be happy to follow up with you, as will I. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you, folks. Thanks so much.